Stunning new developments in the case of Harvey Weinstein as more victims come forward. Today, Hollywood A-listers Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie said they have been sexually assaulted by the disgraced Hollywood mogul. All this comes as disturbing new audio is released of the studio boss caught in a sting operation by police and an Italian actress.
You must come here now.
No.
Please.
No, I don't want to.
I'm not doing anything with you. Now you're embarrassing me.
I'm sorry, I cannot. No, yesterday was kind of aggressive for me. I need to know a person to be touched.
I won't do a thing.
Jonathan Hunt joins us with the latest. Jonathan.
Jesse, the allegations just keep coming. Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie both telling the New York Times Harvey Weinstein sexually harassed them when they were young and starting out in Hollywood. The New Yorker magazine separately reporting allegations of rape. And for the first time, we're hearing that audio of what the New Yorker claims is Harvey Weinstein pressuring a young actress to join him in his hotel room as she complains about being groped. Here's more of that.
I'm feeling very uncomfortable right now.
Please come in now, and 1 minute, and if you want to leave, when the guy comes with my jacket, you can go.
Yesterday you touched my breast.
Oh, please, I'm sorry. Just come on. I'm used to that. Come on.
Are you used to that?
Yes, come in.
Now, we should point out that tape was part of a 2015 police sting operation in New York, and the Manhattan DA's office ultimately declined to pursue charges in the case. The DA's office, in fact, has just put out a statement in the last few minutes on Twitter saying that that audio, quote, was insufficient to prove a crime under New York law. Meantime, the chorus of condemnation of Weinstein is getting louder. Nicole Kidman and George Clooney among the latest to speak out, and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who once considered the movie mogul a political supporter, issued a statement a couple of hours ago saying, quote, "I was shocked and appalled by the revelations about Harvey Weinstein. The behavior described by women coming forward cannot be tolerated. Their courage and the support of others is critical in helping to stop this kind of behavior." Now, Jesse, interesting to note that like the Clintons, the Obamas were also close to Harvey Weinstein. We have not yet heard from President or Mrs. Obama, who once described Harvey Weinstein as a, quote, wonderful human being. That was at the White House in 2013, Jesse.
Thanks, Jonathan. All right, Kimberly, when you hear the audio tape of Weinstein, just disgusting. What do you think about that?
Well, I can imagine the Manhattan DA's office, is very frustrated because when you see that, and as having worked as a prosecutor and worked in sexual assault cases, it's appalling. It's disgusting behavior. That's not just some kind of allegation. You hear the tape there as well. And so this is something that they should open a broader investigation into, especially with more people coming forward to determine whether or not there can be any further charges made in a case like that.
Based off of that tape, you think you might be able to revisit that?
You could, depending where that happened.
Okay, but what are the statute of limitations in places like New York and Los Angeles? These are very serious allegations.
Right.
You're not talking about women who were able to pass up some of his advances. You're talking about the most serious allegations of sexual assault and rape here. Right. So what are the statute of limitations in New York City and Los Angeles?
Depending, they'd be able to bring the case depending on where it occurs. So there's separate investigations and finding out what time, how many times it happened. Some of them they might be able to prosecute 1 or 2 instances. They may not be able to prosecute if others are further back. It's very similar in terms of what we saw with Bill Cosby's case, right? So you're going to have to determine that. But this tape in particular, I think is interesting because she's referring to a previous incident the day before where she was actually physically touched. That could be sexual battery, sexual assault.
And he seems to acknowledge that.
Right. And so there's a statement against interest there that would come in that would be admissible. You'd be able to play that tape in court, that whole type of thing, and bring it in front of the judge.
And Kennedy, Hillary waited 5 days to come out and condemn this guy.
Yeah, how
Why so long?
Because, unfortunately, this is how the system works in politics and in entertainment. And Harvey Weinstein, for years, for decades, had a stranglehold on both. He did something very interesting. And, Kimberly, I'm sure you've taken note of this. He hired Lisa Bloom, he said as a tutor. But also, here's a woman who normally, she handles sort of class action, very high profile sexual abuse, sexual assault cases, as, Gloria Allred has done the same thing. Yeah. Harvey Weinstein made sure that he hired her so she would have to recuse herself, so she wouldn't be able to parade a dozen women before cameras. And I think that was very intentional on his part. And it's all part of the cycle of abuse.
She had something in production,
well,
I
Lisa
think, as
Bloom
well.
Also, yes, he had optioned one of her books, exactly.
Something else that's part of the cycle is abuse, that cycle of abuse that you just pointed out, is something that's happening again. I think in this case, we've seen it in other high-profile cases this year. I want to take care to point it out. We're getting reactions now from Hollywood celebrities, people that have been working with him for decades, some of them. People like George Clooney and Jennifer Lawrence and Angelina Jolie, and the list goes on and on and on. A lot of folks who have spoken out to condemn Harvey Weinstein do so quite eloquently. I'll cite George Clooney, who said, straight up, this is indefensible. The problem with a lot of responses we're seeing, to me, comes from the things they say after they call him out. George Clooney himself did this in his interview. People like him and Jennifer Lawrence say that they have not personally been witness or privy to any of these behaviors from Harvey Weinstein. This is something we see all the time, and I don't know if there's a legal basis for this here, if there's legal reasons, like they're covering their butts, and that's why they include things like this in their statement, but it just rubs me the wrong way that they will take care to say they haven't seen it. When do people rape and sexually assault victims in front of other people? Of course you haven't seen this behavior. Of course Harvey Weinstein didn't ask a young woman to watch him take a shower naked in front of somebody else. Right. This happens in private. Perpetrators go to great lengths to cover up their crimes. It's like if you were talking about a murderer in a court of law, well, I never saw him murder. This is horrible, but I never saw him murder anyone.
That is a good point.
Of course you didn't.
Yeah.
Very good point, Richard.
He also brought in some executive assistants and things like that. They said to lure people in to make them feel like they weren't alone, and then engage in this behavior, which is just classic sexual predator behavior.
Serial sexual predator, if you look at all the allegations over the course of the time. Richard, people are saying this shows Hollywood hypocrisy, that they champion women's rights, and they've criticized Donald Trump in the past, but have been totally quiet for decades about a guy right under their nose.
Well, I think this is a broader problem that we have in this country around, I hate to use the words, but this ideal of rape culture, right? And I think, we commend these women for being brave and speaking out, and I think they're worthy of commending. But I think we have to have a larger conversation, not only about commending these women, but how do we do a better job of educating our men and boys to not make these type of mistakes, right? Like, how do we start having these conversations earlier and earlier and earlier?
How about having accountability within your human resource department?
No, I hear you, Kennedy, I hear you.
No, but let me finish this point, because this is something that really strikes me about this story. You know who's brave? The intern or the assistant who's working in that office for less than a year. The actress who's never had a role, who comes forward and who knows their story is going to be squashed by a press who is complicit, who has these book deals, who has these movie options, and therefore they're not going to report on the stories. The Matt Damons of the world who squashed the 2004 New York Times story. It's really easy for Gwyneth Paltrow to come forward in 2017, when it's safe to go ahead and tell this, when she has benefited from these relationships for decades.
No,
it's another thing. The brave women are the ones whose careers were destroyed, who were sent packing back to the Midwest,
Kennedy,
with their dreams and self-esteem.
I agree with you 100%. What I'm saying is, and we've got to also deal with the supply problem, right? Which is we have men who engage in this behavior over and over again. So how do we stop it before it happens? How do we educate our boys not to make these mistakes, right? How do moms have a conversation with their young boys about this is how you treat women, this is how you don't treat women, right?
I think he knows how to treat women. He purposely mistreated women.
I beg to differ.
Well,
I mean, is that how you treat women?
George Clooney said we have to do a better job at protecting women in the workplace. And that is true. But what is also true, and what needs to happen first is, as Richard says, we need to do a better job of teaching young men, boys, how to behave and how not to behave. I think that's the point.
And how to speak out as well.
He knows the difference between right and wrong, Harvey Weinstein, and he purposely did the wrong thing. So I don't think we need to blame moms for it.
Well, no, but he's saying to just have education about it, which is important, and to have training about it so people know what is appropriate or not. But this is on a whole other level.
Yeah, this goes beyond like a gray area. This guy is a serial abuser if all the allegations are true.
Meaning criminality in it. We're not talking about something being polite, manners, and how you treat women. We're talking about somebody who appears to be a sexually, violent predator.
A criminal.
It's not because of the culture he grew up in, as Lisa Bloom tried to claim in her defense. This is not because he grew up in the 60s and 70s when it was called. It was not appropriate or okay to rape women in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of men and women grew up in the 60s and 70s, and they don't go around treating people like disposable objects.
100%.
Right. So let me get back to the politics of it, because now a lot of people are being asked to return donations. Some donations have been returned, and not all donations have been returned. At what point does all of his money become dirty and you get rid of it immediately, Kimberly?
Well, I know I was reading early in our materials, Jillian, you wrote on an email, we were talking about this. It becomes then difficult to get money back that's been spent. Who do you get it from?
For politicians.
Politicians, when you're saying, he gave money to the Obamas or to the Clintons, if that campaign money's been spent, how are you supposed to claw back something that doesn't exist? Is the candidate supposed to personally pay the money out, and then everybody is expected to make a statement? Hillary Clinton, make a statement. This is somebody, and to disavow.
The Obamas have not made a statement to that point you just made.
And Malia, I think it was Malia, interned for his company last year.
Right, and I think Michelle said he was a good guy or a good friend too. Well, I guess they weren't that close friends, because she didn't have any idea, and anybody else said they didn't have any idea either. So we'll see.